Well, spring is here and away we go. More activities to do for the summer and the growing season. Today we're going to talk about trees and fruit trees and some of those activities. We got a lot of stuff we can talk about on trees, and we'll cover that throughout the growing season. But today we're going to talk about fruit trees primarily and some of the activities that should be looked at or taken care of. Number one is as we go out and look at our trees, how are they looking? They perform well for you last year? Were they planted in areas where our soil pH is quite high, meaning we had some saline issues? Were they watered enough? Just so many different activities that we could be thinking about. But first, here we go on apple trees, fruit trees. When we look at a tree, the first thing we need to look at is how dense does the tree look? We always talk about pruning, and pruning should always be done primarily in the spring. You can do it in the fall, but it's much easier on the tree to do it in the spring. So when you look at pruning, we stand back and look at our tree and pretend like you're looking at a tree that's got leaves on it. And if those branches were all leafed out, can you see through that tree? Apple scab is a great big problem that we have every year with our apple trees, and caused by too dense of foliage on that tree. So if you stand back and you can't see through, we need to get busy and do some trimming. When we make those trimming cuts, look first for those areas that have branches that cross each other. We want to get rid of those because that'll just put added pressure not only when they start fruit, but just the pressure of growing will put pressure on the branch that it's resting on and causing that branch to not do very well. So let's get rid of all those cross branches first when we prune. Secondly, let's take and look at the tree some more. Stand back, take a look on all three sides. Again, picture the leaves and areas that seem really dense. And you can kind of tell by looking at them. Some trees seem to fill in a little bit more on one side than another. Work some on that tree. And it's terrible to say, but sometimes we've got to be a little bit mean to them. It seems like we're taking a lot of branches out. Oftentimes we're not taking enough. We gotta be able to get that good air movement through there. So stand back, do that trimming. When you're making a trim on a branch, make sure you do it at a 45-degree cut. And when you're doing that, if it's a bigger branch, make that little cut on the bottom side first. That way when you cut the tree from the top side, or that branch, it doesn't tear the tree back some. So make that little first cut on the bottom side and then work on the top side and cut down. Smaller branches, that's not so important because we can use them typically with a pruning shear. So once you get all that done, make sure that you have any of the coverings taken off that you had put on the tree for the winter months. There are several fruit variety trees that don't take the winter season so well. So we like to cover them up with some kind of a material, whether it be a plastic barrier. They do make tree guards, lots of different things that can happen. So make sure you get rid of that. So then when you're all done with that, now you can really see what the tree looks like. Stand back, take a look again. Do we have a true leader? If we have a true leader, then we're good to go. If we don't, if we got two leaders appearing like leaders coming off the top of the tree, let's decide which one of them is going to be the leader, and let's get rid of the other. Secondly, when we're looking at these trees, we went into the fall season very, very dry. So let's get out and give them all a really good drink of water this spring. What I like to say is turn the water hose on so it just kind of trickles out the end, not a full gush of water because that just doesn't do a good job of thorough watering. But let's let that water just kind of trickle out the end, and let's do that for in the upwards of an hour and a half per apple tree that you got, maybe even 2 hours because the soil is quite dry and will absorb a lot of moisture. Another item to be thinking about is fertilization. Apple trees don't need fertilization like a grass or other different plant species in our garden. However, a little fertilizer does go a long ways. I would use something like a 10-10-10. You can buy that at all the nurseries here in town. Again, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash, and put on accordingly. Depending on the caliper of your tree, meaning the diameter of your tree. For example, if you have like a 8-inch tree, take and spread about a quart of that fertilizer out on the outside edge of the tree. Remember, when trees grow, roots typically stay in that top foot of soil profile. And by putting it out where the roots, the feeder roots are out at that inside edge, then they can absorb that fertilizer and put it on. Do not, do not put all that fertilizer next to the trunk. You will not be happy with the results, because what will happen is it'll kill that tree. So we kind of took care of the early parts of getting that apple tree and the fruit trees going by our trimming, looking back, taking care of the things that could be an added alternative to it, like these tree or these trunk covers. Remember when we put them on, you can't believe how many times I look at a tree and you can tell it's been girdled. What that means is, it's been girdled is there's lots of different ways. Sometimes it's done by a mower where we get too close and always rub the trunk. Sometimes we have tree guards on and we don't get that off, and throughout the growing process, even though you don't think so, there's a lot of pressure applied to that bark area, and then that tree trunk starts getting smaller there, bigger above. Another one that's really bad is tree fabric. Great idea to get your tree started, but after 2 or 3 years, um, we should start making incisions where that trunk of that tree is, because it too will girdle those trees. You cannot believe how many trees I've seen in my lifetime that have been girdled by fabric. So that's a lot of tips for today for the fruit trees. We'll have a new one for you here coming up in the next week. So stay tuned and listen up. And if you are interested in calling me for any reason, you can be reached at 662-7027.